Fear is a quiet companion. It creeps in unnoticed, soft and subtle, until it becomes a weight pressing on your chest, whispering doubts and reminding you of everything that could go wrong. I lived with that kind of fear for most of my life. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of being visible. I thought it was natural, inevitable, a part growing up. But there comes a moment when fear stops being a guide and starts being a cage. I reached that moment on a night that started ordinary and ended with everything I thought I knew about myself shifting. I was walking home after work, the streets unusually quiet, a cool breeze brushing past my face. I had spent the day meticulously avoiding confrontation, keeping my opinions soft, my presence almost invisible. It wasn't laziness or passivity. It was survival. I had learned that asserting yourself too loudly in the wrong space invited ridicule, that dreams spoken too openly could be mocked, and that mistakes were easier to survive if you hid them behind a careful mask. That night, I took a shortcut through a narrow alley, the kind that smells faintly of rain and old brick. I wasn't paying much attention until I heard the footsteps behind me. At first, I told myself it was my imagination, but the sound grew closer, heavier, and I realized I had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. My heartbeat raced, adrenaline surged, and for the first time in weeks, I couldn't ignore fear. It demanded my attention. I stopped. I turned. There was no one there, just shadows stretching unnaturally against the walls. My legs shook, my hands clenched. Fear whispered again, louder this time, reminded me how small I was, how vulnerable. I wanted to run, to escape into the safety of familiar streets, but something inside me held me in place. A quiet, stubborn thought. You can't always run. I spent that night walking slowly, choosing every step deliberately, noticing everything around me. The cool air, the uneven pavement, the distant hum of cars, the flicker of lights in windows. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. For the first time, I realized fear wasn't just a warning. It was a teacher. It forced you to notice yourself, your surroundings, your choices. But it could also paralyze you if you let it. And I had been letting it for too long. The days that followed were a struggle between old habits and new awareness. I started small. I spoke up in meetings at work, not loudly, but firmly. I raised my hand in classes I had previously avoided. I asked questions when I felt confused instead of silently doubting myself. Each act was a small rebellion against a fear that had held me captive for years. Every time my voice found space in a room, I felt my spine straighten just a little, my chest rise a little higher. The real test came when I had to confront someone I had been avoiding for months, a colleague who had criticized me harshly, leaving me anxious before every interaction. I rehearsed what I would say, each word a shield against the fear that threatened to consume me. When the moment arrived, my hands were clammy, my heart pounded, but I spoke. I didn't shout, I didn't beg for approval. I simply stated my position, my thoughts, my boundaries. And the most surprising thing happened. I was heard. Not just heard, but respected. Fear had loomed over me for months, but standing up didn't break me. It strengthened me. Fear manifests differently in everyone. For some, it's the quiet voice that discourages dreams. For others, it's a visible anxiety that colors every interaction. But in every form, the principle is the same. To live fully, you must face it. You must acknowledge it without letting it define you. The night in that alley had been my wake-up call. If I could survive an invisible threat in a dark street, I could survive the visible threats in my daily life. If I could face the unknown without running, I could face my own doubts without hiding. Standing strong doesn't mean being fearless. It means choosing action despite fear. It means looking at what terrifies you most and taking a step forward anyway. It means creating a life where your decisions are not dictated by what might happen, but by what you know you are capable of. Every time I took that step, I felt the invisible chains of fear loosen one link at a time. I started noticing patterns, too. Fear thrives on avoidance. It feeds on hesitation and uncertainty. By confronting what I feared most, failure, judgment, vulnerability, I starved it of its power. I surrounded myself with people who encouraged me, not those who echoed my insecurities. I sought mentors who had faced their own fears and lived to tell the story. Slowly, Fear became less of a master and more of a guidepost, a reminder of the stakes, but not the arbiter of my life. The most profound lesson came quietly. One morning, I realized I no longer checked behind my back before walking into a room. I no longer rehearsed conversations endlessly to avoid embarrassment. I no longer waited for permission to exist fully in my own life. Fear was still there. Yes, a shadow in the corners of my mind, but it no longer dictated the rhythm of my days. I had learned to coexist with it, to respect its presence without giving control. Standing strong is not a moment. It is a practice, a daily choice, an ongoing conversation with yourself. Some days are harder than others. Some fears resurface in new forms. But every time you meet them head-on, every time you act despite the trembling in your chest, you grow. The muscles of courage strengthen with use, and the foundations of self-belief deepen. I often think back to that alley, to the moment I froze and then refused to run. That moment, terrifying and intimate, taught me that strength isn't about absence of fear. It's about presence in the face of it. It taught me that courage doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it simply whispers, "You are enough. You can do this. Step forward." Fear no more, I tell myself now. Not as a mantra shouted into the void, but as a quiet truth I carry into every uncertain morning, every challenge, every shadowed street. Standing strong isn't about perfection. It isn't about winning every battle or never doubting yourself. It's about owning your steps, your voice, your life, even when the ground feels unstable. It's about knowing that fear is temporary, but the courage you practice every day becomes permanent. I learned that fear can't touch you if you refuse to let it dictate your choices. And in that realization, I found freedom, resilience, and a quiet strength I never knew I possessed. It is not the absence of fear that defines us, but the ability to face it, rise, and continue walking forward.